Alright, so this is just a bit of warning that this is a very complicated mod, and I've never done this before, and I didn't have any electrical experience prior to this, and as a result I made a lot of mistakes, which hopefully I'll be able to guide you through here. But it's worth noting that this is not a simple plug and play mod, that you will most likely have to fiddle with it quite a lot before it works well and consistently. Here are the things you're going to need to do this mod. The first thing you're going to need is a PC running Windows. This mod cannot be done with an Arcade1Up PCB because it requires a particular piece of software, a plugin that can only be loaded onto a PC. So I'm going to be linking to the PC that I'm using. You can just buy or pick up a PC with similar specs, and you should be good to go. The next thing you're going to need is an Xbox controller. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling the rumble signals from the controller out to a separate vibration motor, which you can also see on the slide. Now, this cannot be done with any other controller that has rumble in it. For example, a PlayStation controller from any generation. And I know this because I've tried. The reason an Xbox controller works is because they're pre-programmed to automatically interface with Windows, and that's what we want. The next thing we're going to want is this optical relay that you see. And what the relay does is it pulls the signal, the electrical signal, from the Xbox controller that powers the little rumble motor inside the controller, and it converts it to a higher voltage signal, which will then power the larger vibration motor. So where is this extra power supposed to come from? Well, from the 12-volt power supply, of course, which you can see there below the optical relay. Now, I'm using this power supply to power two vibration motors, one for the steering wheel and one underneath my seat. Hypothetically, you could power 3 or maybe even 4 motors. I don't know why you would want to do that unless you're just a crazy person, or or a neuroatypical person. No judgment, nothing wrong with that. If you're some kind of Taylor Swift fan and you just want to shake it all off, go for it. I am here to help you. Now, to the right of the power supply, you see we have a motor speed controller. And what this does is it allows you to increase or decrease the amount of rumble that the vibration motor is going to produce. The final thing you're going to want is some 26 AWG wire. Now, 26 AWG is just the gauge of the wire. In other words, the thickness of the wire. So 26 gauge is very thin. But anyway, you're going to need a lot of this stuff, especially if you're going to be wiring all the way out to like a seat. Once you download and install the force feedback plugin, which I'm going to link to in the description, you're going to open up the interface and you're going to look for this particular screen. And I've highlighted the two things that you absolutely have to do here, which is select the device GUID. There's going to be a drop-down menu, and you should be able to drop it down and see your Xbox controller there. When you select it, it will give you this crazy long string of numbers. Don't worry about that. The other thing you're going to want to do is check the Enable Rumble checkbox there, which you've seen I've done. The other thing you see on the screen is a list of the currently available games that this plugin actually supports. These are primarily MAME-based games and some Sega Model 2 games. Now, what's not listed here is a growing list of Technoparrot games, which are also compatible with this mod, but are not listed here, and that list grows monthly. So you can do a little bit more digging on your own if you want to see if this modification is worth your time. Here we're looking at an official Microsoft Xbox controller from the front. Here is the back of the controller and all the places you need to remove the screws from. Note that the 7th one may be underneath that sticker. Here's what it'll look like once you open it up. And here's what everything looks like when you've pulled everything out of the shell. Note that I've highlighted only the motor on the right side. That's the only motor we're interested in. The other one is never activated in any games for some reason. It's just totally ignored, so we're also going to ignore it. So you just snip the wires from the motor going to the controller, and you want to snip them as close to the motor as you can get, because we're going to need that slack from those wires. We're keeping those wires there. In the previous photos, what you were looking at was an official Microsoft Xbox controller, but I do not recommend that you use one of those, even if you have one lying around. The reason is they are really difficult to troubleshoot, and I discovered when I had ruined my original Microsoft Xbox controller and I bought a knockoff one from eBay, that the eBay one was superior in every way in regards to this particular mod. So I'm going to link to that one, and it's like $15 or something. So this is the one that I recommend you use. Here's a quick comparison between the motor that comes in the Xbox controller on the left, and on the right we have a much larger motor that we're going to be using, which spins at 8,000 RPM and is weighted on both sides. It is significantly stronger. Here's a quick test I ran just to see if everything would work after wired up. You might notice the relay on the far right there is making these rapid clicking sounds, which is very annoying. But our mod will actually not be using these mechanical relays, so just ignore that for now. In that last little clip, you could see the motors are pretty strong and will shake themselves free of, your conduit hanger, which I'm using, or anything else that you might be thinking of using to attach the motor to your cabinet. So I'm using some Titebond wood glue here to secure them so they won't shake free anymore. Here's everything hooked up to the back of my Outrun control panel. If you listen, you can actually hear the spinning part of the motor smack the control panel when it spins really quickly. I should have lifted up the mounting further to create more clearance. When the motor spins very quickly, it will actually rock back and forth. And close the gap of whatever clearance you have, therefore smacking into the surface on which it's mounted on if you don't create enough clearance. This is the back of the Outrun control panel with nothing installed except for the analog encoder, which you can see at the top in red there. Now, there's a whole other video that B-Kong from Kongs R Us has done to convert your Outrun cabinet to be able to use the steering wheel with a PC. So I'm going to link to that video. That's its own mod. What I'm highlighting here is the connections or the extensions that are going to need to be made from those two little wires on the Xbox controller out to new thicker wires. And the wires coming from out of the Xbox controller are so thin that you have to be pretty careful to score them and pull off the plastic sheathing. So just be very gentle with it, be patient, take your time, and you'll be able to expose the wire. And once you do that, you can make the connections to the thicker wire. Again, we are ignoring the rumble motor wires on the left, so you can see that at the top of the screen there, and I'm just tucking them away underneath the controller. We're going to ignore them completely. In order to make the many wire connections that you're going to need to do this mod, I recommend using the solder seal wire connectors, which are really easy and intuitive to use. and it's much easier than doing manual soldering of between wires or traditional wire connectors. So I'm going to link to a video that will teach you how to use these things, as well as a link to the actual brand that I'm using in my mod. The 26 gauge wire that I use were solid core. So you can see here I've removed the sheathing, and inside is a solid piece of wire, as opposed to the sort of the kind with like many little strands that look like little hairs that you twist together. Either kind of wire will actually work. For my mod, I just prefer the solid wires. They're a little bit easier to work with, in my opinion. And here, what you're looking at is you can twist the wire onto itself and make a loop, and then thread another wire through that, and then loop that, and so that will make a nice little connection between the two wires. And then you place the solder seal connectors over them, or you slide them over them, and then you heat them up, and you're kind of done. This is the back of the bootleg Xbox controller after it's been pulled out of its shell. What's important here is that you tape the main wire that's going to connect to your USB port on your PC to the back of the controller, like so. The reason you want to do that is those colored wires that are going to the actual, the PCB of the controller are very fragile, and you don't want those things to be tugged out or mess with in any way. So by taping that main wire there, you keep those connections nice and stable. Here are some plastic PCB feet that you're going to need to mount the Xbox controller, as well as the optical relay to your control panel. The first connection you're going to make is between your Xbox controller and the optical relay. And the red and black wires you see here are accurate and should be connecting in exactly these places. At this point, I'm going to do a quick tangent about why you should not use a mechanical relay for this mod, which I made the mistake of using at the outset because I didn't know any better. But in essence, a mechanical relay has moving pieces that connect over and over and over again based on the signal. And because the rumble signals sent out by the Xbox controller are so numerous, it's like dozens per second, this thing will burn out completely in about 2 weeks. And so it will work in the beginning, and it will seem like, woo, I made my mod, it's awesome. And then 2 weeks later, it would just stop working. It was very frustrating. So I troubleshot this thing to all hell, and only realized later that there's an option for an optical relay, which has no moving parts and will function hypothetically forever without ever burning out, because there's no mechanical pieces moving to fail. So that's what you want. You want the optical relay on the right there. I'm going to link to it. It may sell out, but any optical relay that's a DC relay should work. So I may also link to alternatives as well. All right, moving on. The next connection we're going to be making is between the relay and the motor controller, and also the power supply. So I'm not going to talk through all this. I don't even know if I can keep it straight in my own head anymore. But as long as you follow all of the black and red lines here, you'll be good. An important note is you're going to have to cut the wire that comes out of the power brick that ends in the barrel that normally connects into whatever device you would normally be connecting the power to. So you're going to cut that wire to expose the red and black wires inside, and then you're going to strip those wires and extend them to make these connections. So that is an important bit of surgery that has to be done. Now these connections are for you neuroatypical people who will be connecting a second, third, or even fourth motor to this crazy rig. To this neuroatypical rig. finally, the motor controller will be connecting to the rumble motor itself. Now, to facilitate all the signals being sent back and forth between your steering wheel via the analog encoder in red at the top there, the Xbox controller, and the PC, we are going to be connecting the analog encoder and the Xbox controller to the PC via a USB-Y cable. Now, this particular USB-Y cable is special because in addition to transferring power, it also transfers data. And that's important because it's going to be receiving data from your steering wheel as to which way you're turning. And it will simultaneously be sending data from your PC to the Xbox controller about when the game should be rumbling. Here we're looking at the underside of the bench where my seat is mounted. And you can see at first I mounted the second rumble motor or vibration motor to the side of my bass shaker there. My thought was, well, vibrations are vibrations. I'm not going to feel where they're coming from. Wrong. You actually do feel that the motor is mounted to one side, so then it just feels like only one butt cheek is jiggling. Now, if you want your whole butt to jiggle or shake, whichever word feels more masculine to you, then you will mount your motor at the center of, where you'll be sitting. So I had to actually mount it on a side panel here, which is and I had to move the bass shaker forward to make room for it. The other thing that you see highlighted at the top of the screen here is the motor controller. Now you might be asking, why would I need such a thing? I just want full power all the time. No, you don't. I made that mistake. And these motors are so strong that they rumble like crazy, and it's distracting. It actually ruins the gaming experience. So by having a controller there, you can regulate, you can turn it down or turn it up to your taste. Here's a close-up of the motor mounted, and you can see it's a little over-engineered. And the reason for that is it kept shaking free. So I had to keep reinforcing it with more and more things, with glue, with more screws, with Z-clips, just everything that I could throw at it to kind of keep it attached and relatively stable. And it's been good for some months now, and it works great. So just take note of that. Just take mental note that not to underestimate the strength of this motor. So back to the subject of the motor controller, which I'm definitely recommending. The reason you want these motor controllers on pretty much every motor that you mount is the motors are so strong that if you run them all at full strength, they'll actually negate each other. What I mean by that is they're so strong that you'll only feel one and not the other, which sounds strange, but it's true. So you have to calibrate them in such a way where you actually feel the rumbling in both motors. So I actually have it turned up higher on the steering wheel and a little bit lower on the seat. And that way I can kind of feel it in both places whenever I run off the road or some jerk car hits me in a game. The final important note about these motor controllers is placement. Make sure they're all easily accessible while you're playing a game so that you can make all your adjustments and tweaks on the fly without having to disassemble your cab or flip over your seat. And here's some footage of the magic in motion. So from all that shaking, you can see why I might be nervous that wire connections to the actual rumble motor might come loose at some point. So I taught myself how to solder in order to solder the connections so that would not happen. And I discovered it was actually pretty easy. So you can see here, what you do is you just kind of loop the wire through the hole a couple of times, and then you throw on some solder blobs, and you're good to go. And I taught myself how to solder using this particular beginner's solders kit, which teaches you how to do it, has some practice boards, and I was up and running in about 20 minutes. So it's a great skill to have, and if you're intimidated and like me, just take heart that you can teach yourself how to do this, and I did, and it works great, and now I have a sort of extra tool in my toolkit, and so can you. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope if you decide to take the leap and do this mod that it works out great for you and improves your gameplay experience exponentially. It has for me. I mean, I really highly recommend that you try this if you're so inclined. And stay tuned. I'm going to be posting some more videos, some more how-to videos on some other cool mods. And anyway, if you do these, please comment below and let me know if you have any other questions, or if you succeeded or are just happy that you discovered this video. Thanks so much.